period.
January 8th.
Yeah.
Yes, and so it is 4 o'clock. Judy, I just want to talk about the regional fair question. We are finalizing dates. We are right now planning to have we're planning for both a virtual fair and for a face-to-face fair. And the dates for the face-to-face fair, some of our spaces are waiting on decisions some of them are at universities. They're waiting on university level decisions to be able to say, yes, we can confirm that date. But all of them are currently being planned if we have to have a virtual fair, it will be the same date as the face-to-face fair. We're just waiting on a couple confirmations before they get updated on the website.
Or similar to that date. It may be that if it's virtual, instead of happening on one day, they may divide it up over 2 days or something like that. But it will be basically the same time frame because the people will be booking that.
Yes, and we are looking at January, February dates, so they're not.
Yeah. So look, I would count, except for Region 8, expect for your regional fairs to be in February.
You got a January 8th one just came up on the screen.
Region 7, Coleman's Fair will be.
Region 7, rather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will be January.
And he usually has that in December.
Yeah.
But he's going to wait and have it in January.
Okay, thank you, Judy. So you can get rolling again.
Okay, all right.
Sure
Here we go. So the Institutional Review Board, we talked about that one. That's for human subjects. Let me get in the slideshow so you can see it a little bit better. All right, if you are working with, we have a scientific review committee, which is the SRC, and they look at every single project that comes to the state fair level. Most of your regional fairs will look at all of the projects as well. I can't swear that all of them do because they have some independence. If they are affiliated with ISEF, they have to in order to stay affiliated. I'm going to state this very plainly as I can. Elementary students cannot culture bacteria at all, anywhere. Okay? Middle school and high school students can culture bacteria, but no one can culture bacteria at home. That's an ISEF rule and regulation and will disqualify you. In the days of virtual school, I would say to your students, don't do projects with bacteria because you can't grow it at home, period. If you get back into the classroom, then they will let you swab a plate, seal it up permanently, and then take it into school or take it into a university or a college, community college, or laboratory somewhere, and then work on it. But you cannot leave it at home or else you are disqualified. That's not my rule, that's ISEF's rule. But I agree with it because I've had lots of instances where I've been reading about these plates that they've cultured set out on the kitchen table. And they're your friends as we eat breakfast in the morning, you know, and we have absolutely no idea what we're culturing. And things that students really love to swab is everything in sight and around sinks and drains and countertops and all these places that now we are thinking more and more and more, you know, are dangerous for us to be, you know, around and touching things. So,
and younger brothers and sisters like to pick up Petri dishes, and first thing they do is smell of them.
Yes.
Smell them. So no.
Now,
not at home.
So elementary students don't have it. Middle school, if you are trained in microbiology, then if you feel like you can safely do it with your students in your classroom or at another facility, then go for it. But most of us are not trained in the proper culturing and safety issues in microbiology. So that's in there. The SRC does read everything you do. They look at the rules and regulations, and there is a checklist for SRC review that we have put in that folder that give you a whole lot of cheat sheets that you can use to go over different types of projects. You know, general review, checking things off, or if you have specific issues like humans or animals or microorganisms or things like that, sheets to be able to use for that. So I have my cat down here who may jump up and join us, so I hope not. So anyway, if you have questions, you can feel free to email our SRC committee at the state level. And ISEF also has an SRC committee that they try to respond within 1 to 2 days of any question you ask them, whether or not this is permitted and legal. And if you email us and we don't know the answer, we will contact ISEF and ask them the question as well. But this is before they start working on something, so try not to wait too long. Doing the research, and I'm going to skip through this real quickly. We talked about journaling at the very beginning. Everything students do should be in the journal, including this research plan that they've done. Needs to be in there. Any results, any data that they are collecting needs to go in there, and what they're getting for the analysis, the results. Everything you are doing needs to go in that journal. When they present their projects, if it's in front of some sort of a backboard, they are allowed to take their journal with them. And judges like to look at journals because then they can see exactly what students do. Looking at how to analyze the data. If you are in a situation where you have a separate math teacher from the science teacher, bring the math teacher in to talk about ways of looking at data, how to display data, how to analyze data, finding patterns, statistical relationships. It means a lot more when they're looking at their projects. How to make tables to be able to represent things. Graphs are great for visually representing things when sometimes a table is just a lot of numbers. Photographs are always important to have of your project. This year, it may be extremely important to have for your project, because if it ends up being virtual fairs, they won't be able to bring any stuff with them, but a lot of the stuff they're not supposed to bring anyway to a competition. Photographs are allowed as long as they don't show like dissections and things like that. So anything that would be potentially would bother people. You know, PETA does look at what goes on. So looking at encouraging your students to do photographs of the experimental setup that they did, of results of things that they tested, especially their things they have built in engineering along the way. You need to help assist your students in coming up with conclusions from that data. Again, with your math people can help you with that, but then coming in and say, okay, did I collect enough data to be able to come up with a conclusion? Is it significant? Having a hypothesis that was not supported is just as important as having one that was supported. And we tend to see students often that say, well, my project didn't work, it was a failure because my hypothesis was wrong. And I'm saying no. And Manley, what is your phrase that you from Edison that you always give all the time with that one about project?
I was telling about one time he was being interviewed after he came up with the light bulb, and I can't remember if it was 3,000 or 5,000 combinations of the filament material, the way it was put together, the gas inside, and the bulb. He had done about, say, 3,000 combinations of those before he got the successful light bulb. And a reporter asked him, well, Mr. Edison, how do you feel about 2,999 failures? He said, what do you mean? He said, we didn't have any failures. He said, really? He said, yeah, we could tell you 2,999 ways that you should not make a light bulb. So he was pretty positive on it.
And so, and that's what you need to be doing with your students. If whatever they try turned out not to work, then you turn it around and say, well, okay, now we know what doesn't work. So now we need to think about other ways of doing it that might work better. And so that instead of saying, no, this is a failure. And this gets me back to grading every portion of the project instead of giving only the final grade for the project, because then they feel a lot of pressure. If this has to work, it has to be successful. And that's the process teaches them much more than what that final answer does along the way.
Yeah, and Judy, this is a good place. There's a question in the chat about should they submit the journal at any time?
I would review the journal as a teacher of a student. I would look through the journal and make sure that they're putting things in there along the way, that it's not just a blank book that they're carrying around with them, but make sure that there are entries that are going in there. And that can be,
As a teacher, I'd look at it soon. If I were the teacher, I'd make sure that soon, I'd look at it before they started their experiment, and I look at it very soon after or in the middle of, because you don't want them to get far down the road and they haven't been writing down things. So you want to be on that journal really early on, and then of course you're going to get it at the end. But you don't wait till the end to look at it. You need to look at it at least 2 or 3 times earlier.
And I think that specifically, would they, as a teacher, I think, yes, we answered that, but then would they need it for the fair, for the competition?
yes. And I hope all the regional fairs know that, but I know that I said it at Region 5, and at the state fair, I specifically say, if you have journals or a research paper, bring that with you to display at your project. Not a lot of other stuff, but journals, yes. Research papers, yes, along the way. Things that they can address at the end when they're looking at their conclusions, those practical applications or inferences are what they would change or future work that they would do. Now we're through with this one, so I can stop sharing there. And I can say we're now, and what we're supposed to be covering for the last session. So I have to open that up because it's not open. So while I'm getting this, do you have any questions? About anything that we've said last little bit?
Somebody said E. coli is such a pretty green. It is. It is a pretty green, but don't use it.
Yes. Okay. All right. So go back. Sorry, I didn't have the 6th one open. And I apologize for having all these PowerPoints, but and it's a lot of stuff, a lot of material, but you have
But
these.
they'll have it later.
You'll
have
have
it
this
later.
to
They
take
can
back with you. You can share it with other teachers, or you can use it for arguments and talking about why we need to be doing these things, which is the slide that's up here right now. And I got this as a question. Could I address maybe ways to talk about why students should be doing research projects? It's an amazing way for students to really understand the process that scientists and engineers go through. I think in today's world, it has become really important that we educate our students to be good scientific consumers and aware of how science happens, that it's not something that is made up. It is something that is tested, and it is continually tested. So as we test it the first time, and we may test it later and discover that that first, we can do it better, or there was a better answer. It's not a straight line. Remember, it was circles and everything we talked about, whether it was scientific inquiry or the engineering design, and it's constantly being challenged and tested and proven, and we continually try to come up with the best answer. But it's not something that is made up. It's not fake news, okay? So it is a great preparation for students learning how it works. Hopefully they will be more encouraged to go into science or engineering, technology, mathematics to be able to do this. Getting the students used to presenting in front of other people is a valuable skill that the more they do it, the more comfortable they will be. So if they start early, then it's much easier when as they progress through the years. Because they're not as much judgmental when you're little as when you get up, different along the ways. It gives them a understanding of the way a process works from start to finish, that you don't say you're going to do a project and immediately start manipulating things. It's you have to think about it, and you have to do planning and have to do background research before you ever get started working on things. And having that background information is really important for students to think about. So, okay. So one of the things that I look at a lot of the abstracts, and I review a lot of these at the state fair level and at the regional fair level. And I see abstracts that students write that are 20 words, literally. And I see some that they try to type in their entire research paper. And it's somewhere in between those. It's going to be a few sentences. It's a maximum of 250 words. A few sentences on the purpose, a few sentences of what my procedure was, a few sentences about the data, and a few sentences about my conclusion. That's it. That's all it is. Doesn't have anything else added to it. We have if your students move from your school fair or a local county fair to a regional fair or the state fair, they have to have the North Carolina abstract form. There's an ISEF abstract form that's a lot more complicated. We made our own to make it simpler. This form can be typed into, and I really, really hope that you will do it with a PDF reader and type into the form and then save it with the student's name instead of printing it out and then they're writing it, or printing it out and then they're pasting a typed piece of paper on top of the abstract form. Because then it's really hard to read either one of those. But if you save it as that PDF that it is already, after you've typed into it, it's a whole lot easier for us to be able to read. And this is displayed at the project board. It's not on the board, but it's displayed at the board. So if it's one of those that looks really messy versus one of those that's been typed into and then saved as a PDF, it looks, you can tell the difference when it's displayed at the board. If they're doing a written paper, and I don't know if you can see my face. This is a book I really like. I am going to stop my sharing for a second. This is a book by NSTA, and it's called STEM Student Research Handbook. We used to give this out to teachers who participated in our workshops. It is really written more at the high school level, but it is excellent, and you can take it down into the middle school, and you can take materials out of it for if you're working at even the elementary school level. But it gives you information on how to write a paper and the order it should be in. It also talks about doing oral presentations. And there's some, students can go to some of the competitions that have an oral competition, like middle school and high school can go to North Carolina Student Academy of Sciences. That's where they submit a research paper and then they present orally to judges that have read their paper. So there's some information about that. Backboard for the poster, there are things that need to be on there. If you have an engineering, it does not have a hypothesis, but you need to talk about the need or the problem. And it was pointed out to me by one of the regional directors who, Elisa Wycliffe, down in the Charlotte Region 6, she ran a virtual National Science and Humanities competition this summer. And they discovered that posters that include, if it's all virtual, and the students were interviewed on the telephone, and judges were looking at the project, a photo or a PDF of the project board. It's nice to have something, and they can look at those ahead of time. Nice to have something on there that in the introduction as to why this project was important to the student. What was their drive of wanting to do it. So if it's virtual, you may want to put something like that in, which would help the judges connect with what the student's purpose, what drive was, and why they were interested in it. You will get this as well, so I don't need to read it to you. Display and safety is something that we do go over, and we will, not all the regional fairs are as careful about looking at display and safety as others. And I can say that because I see what comes in at the state level, and I get the comment, well, this was fine at my regional fair, why can't I have it here now? And it's really heartbreaking when you have to tell students that, I'm sorry, the seeds that you pasted all over your backboard are food, and no food of any kind is allowed on your project. So we either have to scrape the seeds off or we're going to have to do something different. And they're bringing in big things of water. That's not, you can't have any liquids. So there are things that, well, I'll go over briefly some of those display and safety rules. One of the things that's very easy to do is the student and the board, or on a piece of paper in front of the board, must credit who has made, who took all the photographs. And if it's the student, then say all the photographs were made by me or made by the student participant or student presenter. If they were made by their parent, and say, you know, the photographs were taken by my parent. Any of the graphs, charts, things like that need to also be credited, or images. And if they comes from the internet, it needs to have the full internet location on it, not just, you know, google.com. And somebody asked me that in one of the research plans when they sent in things saying they got google.com as a resource. That is not a resource, that's a search engine. So they need, anytime, you have to have the full address of any of that. And this is partially to show that the student actually did it, and the student didn't do it, then somebody else did it. And that's important when you're judging it. No acknowledgments can be put on the board, including if the student wants to say, I want to thank my mom for carrying me around the county to collect water samples. They need to thank them in person. They can put it in their research plan. I mean, not the research plan, they can put it in their research paper, but it cannot be on the board. And there are some schools that say you can't even put the student's name on the front of the board, but they can put it in the back of the board. ISEF rules and regulations, and anything that's allowed on the abstract, since you display the abstract, can be on the board, which means you can have the student's name, the school, and the city that the school is in. But that is up to your individual school in your county, you know, of saying that. But that's what ISEF says you can do. All right, so you can argue that if you want to. However, if you live in a very small community and everybody knows each other, and the judges that you have knows the student in the school, it may be better to have the name on the back of the board so that they don't go up and say, that's my neighbor's kid, I better give him a good grade, you know? So thinking about things like that. So display and safety. I'm looking at my time, I've got to talk fast. These are things that are not allowed at the project board. Now, they may have worked with them in their research, which is just fine. They just can't bring it with them. Anything that's alive, even plants, they can't bring sand, soil, rock. No taxidermy. For some reason, we get a lot of teeth that are brought in. I don't know why people want to bring in teeth, but even if they've been sterilized, no, I'm sorry, you can't bring them. No food. The only plant materials is if, like, you have a display board that has wood built in it that's preserved, so that's okay. No chemicals, even water. No hazardous substances or devices. We had one year a young man who did Genghis Khan's underwear was the name of his project, which we all immediately in the SRC committee had to go, okay, what was this one? What did he do? He was shooting with a bow and arrow into different types of fabric to find out which one was stronger. Because Genghis Khan had all of his soldiers wearing silk garments underneath because it helped turn the blade whenever they were coming. So anyway, he wanted to bring his bow and arrow in, the blade arrows, and we said no. No, a photograph is all that's sufficient. So this is a student that we took to ISEF 2 years, not this past year, but the year before. And she won an award, and this is her project. She was looking at how to accelerate glue setting in different situations and efficiency. So here is her board. You can see she does not have, this is, what is down here at the bottom? Oh, that's somebody else's. I can't zoom in on that. But anyway, this is her display and safety review form that's posted there. We post them at the projects at the state level that we do, so that because if it's there, then students know, yeah, we actually do check them and it counts. And the only other forms that would be displayed would be the 1C, which is if you work at an institution or somewhere other than home or school. That is important because it clarifies on that form, and I think I started talking about it, what the student did, what the institution did, and how much was student driven and how much was driven by the institution. Was the student there just to use the equipment, or was she part of an ongoing project? And so that's important. I mentioned bringing logs and journals. That is important. If you're looking at the judging, it talks about originality. Originality is not how artistic they are and their decorating of their project board. It is instead how original their idea was. We judge on clarity. I mean, we like to be able to read things. It needs to be neat, but we don't judge on our artistic ability. These are a few slides, and I need to see if I can bring up my chat window here. I don't have much time, but I would,
25 minutes.
oh, 25 minutes. I've been trying to move fast. So, and Teresa said we're trying to get more alumni stories as well. I need to go back. So I would say there is, back to the journal about submitting the journal at any time. There's one journal, and you don't have multiple copies unless you want to make a copy before you take it to a competition so that your original one, if it gets lost, you still have it, okay? So these are some that, these are not from my students, all right? So you can look, the very first thing that I see up here is an abstract. The abstract has to be listed up in front. That would not be allowed. Would have to cover up the word abstract, and they write down there instead summary. So they can have the same thing up on their board, but it's called summary instead of abstract along the way. And I can't read what the far right-hand side is along the way, but you see that this student has journals and papers and things like that, and that's fine. That works. Okay, here's one that I couldn't help but laugh at. We're talking about not having stuff at your project, nothing sharp, no powders, no chemicals. All right, we have all of the stuff that he brought with definitely things that are rusty and sharp and that, you know, you'd have to worry about. If you were cut by any of these, you would be in real trouble. But he also
Got a hoe
had,
and a saw. Nails. Golly.
there's a photograph in the background of the exact
Acid.
same thing. So Manley, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, everything you see on that table needs to be gone, except the, the display standing up. That's fine, but yeah, they're in the pictures. They don't need to be there, and they got all kinds of acids and stuff in those containers, and they got a picture that shows what's in the containers on the front of the display. So, and then the hoe and the saw, I'm sure they had to remove that, but somebody can pick it up and do something cute. And next thing you know, somebody's cut with a rusty saw.
So,
Yeah, not good.
right. It's amazing what parents think is just fine to bring, okay?
And the kids feel like they're devastated if you remove it, but the judges are expecting not to see that stuff.
Right. So this is one that I think the student probably spent almost as much time cutting out lipsticks and eyeshadows and things like that and pasting them on the board as they did with their project. This is detracting from what's actually up there. So again, you want to make sure that your students understand, and I need to cover up the names, but these are not from North Carolina, okay? I just grabbed these off the internet. These are things that students tend to want to do because they think that it will make it prettier, and we don't, judges don't look at that. So you've got your introduction up here. Down at the far right-hand corner, she does have acknowledgements, and those would have to be removed from the project board in order for it to be able to be accepted by the Display and Safety Committee. The rest of it would stay up there, but it's just distracting you from what is important along the way. All right, here's another one that you have the wood on there. So this is actually a model that they have done. So you can bring models that you have built. I know there's always discussion, can you bring a model? You can bring a model if it, it gives you the data displays your testing and data that you've done if it's important to understanding your project. They were doing pretty good until they got down and somebody put a little orange card in front with acknowledgements on it. Remember, that's not accepted, so along the way.
Plus, the particular model they have is not that unique in design. And so that's another problem with that one.
Yeah, that probably would not have gotten too far beyond the school level because it's something that is not something that's very original. All right, so now I need to talk. It's 4:30. We wanted to talk to you about running a fair. And whenever if you've been assigned to run your school fair, these are things you need to look at and you need to think about. First of all, right now you need to be setting up your timeline. And by knowing that except for Region 7, all the regional fairs will be in February, that lets you know that you need to have everything geared to the point if it moves from your school to a county fair, that it has to be ready for that. If it goes from your school to a regional fair, you need to have your fair in early January. So there is time, make sure that there's time to get a student registered for a regional competition. So your timeline, and you can pull out the Science Buddies project if you want to look at that. But for running a fair, we've actually created a couple of tools for you. These tools are, first of all, there's some tips and tasks for it, and this was written for regional fair directors and for like county fair directors who are running larger events. It's probably going to be more than you need. It's more than some of our regional directors need, but it has a lot of information. It starts 12 months ahead of time with planning details. And that is one of those documents that we have given to you. And I'll show it to you in just a second. The other one, this fair planning grid timeline, is an Excel spreadsheet. We have a modified version of that we have tailored to the state fair level, and we use it year after year, and we add things to that Excel spreadsheet. It has down what the task is, what group of people, like what committee is responsible for it, and then what individual in particular is taking ownership of solving that problem, the date that it is completed, and then any comments along the way, like things that you found out. And we use this again year after year and add to it. So these are all in the folder. And then for SRC, for reviewing the projects, we have given you a whole list of cheat sheets to be able to use to review a project. And even in your classroom, you can pull that out if you have a question about something and go through it. Our head of our SRC committee, Dr. Rachel Graham, has been doing SRC now for a pretty good while and goes to the training sessions every time she goes to ISEF to become even more proficient. Has a PowerPoint that has a video in it that lasts for, I don't know, it's at least a 30, 45-minute video that's embedded in the PowerPoint for training on how to review projects for issues so that they would be legal. So let me see where I am with this. And I think I just clicked on the website. I did. Let me get out of that. Okay, so let me go. All right, so let me quit sharing for a second and show you those. Okay, I've got a lot of windows up here. All right, I tried to put them in order. Okay, this is the Excel spreadsheet. And right now it's in as a Google form. As a Google, as a Google spreadsheet. Anyway, Google Sheet. So the way it is you can type in the target date for your fair right here. And if I were to change that date, we have, and these are approximate dates of how far ahead of time you need to start planning it. So you can see that we've got some things that for a March fair, we're saying we need to have it done by January. And most of these things are getting a location. As I said, this may be way beyond what you need, but you can modify it to what you need of recruiting people, looking at, reviewing, getting SRC, reviewing awards. Are you going to have awards? You don't know that. Recruiting judges, things like that. So this is all in here. Again, it's more than you may need. Publicity, if there are any finances. Debriefing is the last thing, which you always need to do. This is the tips and tasks for local regional fair director. This is written in paragraph form, and it goes over a lot of the things that are in that Excel spreadsheet, but explains it a little bit better. If you have a website, what it needs to have on there. Again, for a school fair, you probably don't have to do this. If you're a county fair, you may have feeder fairs that come into you. When do you need to talk to them? And again, we wrote it mainly for regional directors, but we think it's got enough good information to be able to share it with you, to be able to use. These are the ones we looked at, ISF. This is our North Carolina Science Engineering Fair site. If you go under the rules section, we have gone in and we have a flow chart over here. Again, Rachel Graham put that together, and her time since early March she is actually, her area of research is on coronaviruses. So she has been very busy since early March working on the virus, but she still is working with us as well. So this is every form. It tells you what it's about, description, how to fill it out, who needs to fill it out, and when it needs to be filled out, okay? So those are things to give you. You can download, these are the up-to-date forms. Notice there is not a form for the research plan. That needs to be separate, and that's on your paper, but that is something that is turned in. So they can write it in their journal, but they also need to write it on a piece of paper that's turned in. And it needs to be in the future tense, not in the past tense along the way. All right, so let me stop sharing that and go back. Okay, judging the projects. We use the ISEF judging criteria, and I recommend it for all fairs. It has separate judging criteria for scientific projects from engineering projects. And it has a point scale in there that you can use. Judges can allocate numbers of points based on the point system for that every set of questions. So you end up having a much fairer judging process instead of, I really kind of like that one. I think they did a good job. And somebody else says, well, I think somebody else did a better job. But if you need to compare them, you need to see what they did a good job on and where their strengths were and what was actually good. What you really want to concentrate on is, in the judging, that the better science or engineering project is the one that's given the higher rating, not the one that has the fanciest equipment or has the prettiest backboard, but which one is the better science and engineering and the process that the student went through. We have issues sometimes with judges going either way, of thinking that this is way too sophisticated a project for a student to have done it. The parents must have done it, until they start asking students questions. Manley, you want to give your word on that one?
Yeah, I'll be quick. Many years ago, I was judging a fair. The bad news is the teacher, one of my lead teachers, set it up at an elementary school when she didn't have. I asked her where all the other judges were, and she said, "You're it. Don't do that to your judges. You need multiple judges, so it's not all falling on one person." Anyway, I had this young fella, fifth grader. I just could swear he didn't do the project. I asked him if he had any help, and he said his father helped him. I said, "Well, what's your father do?" He said, "Well, he's a chief technical consultant for IBM International. I said, oh, yeah, electronic expert. I said, wow. But then he said, what I didn't want to do what he asked me to do. And he reconfigured his whole thing right in front of me. I couldn't believe he tore wires out and asked me if he could plug in a soldering iron and re-soldered everything very safely and expertly. And when it's all said and done, I told him he was pretty good at this. He said, yeah, he's only been doing electronics for about 5 years. He was a 5th grader, but I was really fooled. He knew everything about that project.
Okay, so I briefly took us to the ISAF site. You have in the documents that were shared with you by Teresa, a 3-page document. Then the way I usually do it is I print the science judging on one side and the engineering judging on the back side of a sheet of paper and make copies of that to give to the judges so that way they can judge whatever they need to, whether it's scientific or engineering. Creativity is part of it, the presentation and the interview. So here are the point totals, the research question. Well, this is why we spent some time talking about this. Okay, this is a science project. Design and methodology, that's their research plan, how well they thought it through. The execution, their data collection, that's 20 points. Creativity is 20 points. So a project that has been done by many, many people before is going to get a 0 or very low score in creativity. That presentation is 35 points, 10 points for the poster. That's what I said. It's not how pretty it is. It needs to be clear, clarity of it. They need to be able to read those graphs. They can't print off so tiny numbers that old eyes can't read it along the way. But that interview is 25 points, which is, out of 100 points, it's huge for the students of being able to answer questions. And again, it's not necessarily a canned speech, but it's being able to answer the questions, like with Manly's student, being able to tell you exactly what they did and why they did it and what worked without, you can tell who did the project, whether it's the student's project or the parent's project right away. Engineering projects, you've got that research problem. Remember, we've talked about the problem along the way. We talked about constraints with those problems. The design and methodology, again, research plan in here. Execution, the construction and testing. Creativity is 20 points in that. So whether or not they're successful, not as important as how creative and how they present it. Again, 10 points for the poster, 25 points for that interview process. So you have this in a handout for you to be able to use along the way.
We got about 7 minutes.
Oh, great. Okay. I want you to be able to see our students, and I want to have a little bit of time so communication is extremely important. Okay. These are links that I did check to make sure they work, that you may find useful along the way. Some of them give projects, some of them don't. And I am through with my PowerPoint, so I'm going to stop sharing. And, oh, no, I'm not through with my PowerPoint because it's got the links.
I was going to say, you need the link. Yep.
Yeah, I went through it too fast. Sorry. Oh, it's not in there.
I can put the link.
There it is. Okay. Alumni videos. Thank you. All right. Closing videos. I had this up as a slide as well. So let me make sure you're seeing.
All right, Judy, I'm signing off. I gotta go. I got a class.
Thank
Okay.
you, Manly.
I'll be here.
Yeah, you got to share your, there you go. Perfect.
Okay. All right. So I am going to play the first one. And she's an alumni, and I'll have to turn up my sound.
My name is Lauren Sanders, and I'm a 10th grader at Northwake College and Career Academy. I participate in the MSCN pre-college program, as well as being a Girl Scout and volunteering at Marbles Kids Museum. Something that I really love is science, and that love was instilled to me by my parents. So I and being in the science fair was there was no questions asked about it. I saw that we were having a science fair at my school, so I was just like, I probably should do that. So the first year that I did it on essential oils and the effect of essential oils on bacteria. I got 3rd place in my category for that in my school, but I didn't go to regionals that year. Then the next year, I did my science fair project on ancient wheat versus modern wheat, and I won 1st place in my category. So I progressed on to regionals, where I won 3rd place in my category. So that was a lot of fun. And being at regionals was one of the best experiences because I was able to not only see other people's research, but I was presenting my research, seeing other people's research, and getting judged on my research. So it was kind of nerve-wracking, but it was a lot of fun. And being alone and not having a team, that was a different experience for me. But I learned a lot more confidence. And as the day progressed, I was able to change my aspect, change my way of presenting, because it was a lot easier to do it a different way rather than the way that I had originally planned. And seeing the reaction of the judges when they saw my research, and a lot of them hadn't heard of some of the types of wheat that I was talking about, but it gave them a chance to open their minds, as well as seeing my own mind open while I saw other people's projects and all the cool ideas that they had as well. I'm currently a student at Northway College and Career Academy.
I think it just restarted, Judy.
And I'm planning
Okay.
on being
All right. So I need to get the other one. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing her. Actually, I need to continue sharing, don't I? Okay. And I got out of Zoom. Hold on. All right. So that's one. And these are on our website, so you can go and look at them yourself. This is a student that I had, and I took him to ISAF, I think 2 different times. He's from Union County, and he is now a student at NC State University and has just gotten the Goldwater Fellowship.
Hi, my name is Daniel Haller, and I am an undergraduate student at NC State studying chemical and biomolecular engineering, and I am an NC Science and Engineering Fair alum. I grew up south of Charlotte in Union County. I went to Marvin Ridge High School, and I want to tell you a little bit about the experiences that led me to get interested in science, led me to participate in NC Science and Engineering Fairs, and led me to where I am today, which is working in research. I've always been really interested in science. I'm sure like many people watching, I grew up, both of my parents are engineers, so science has always been a part of my life. What got me into the research world was a really exceptional teacher who not only sparked my interest in biology, but also helped me realize that I really wanted to try this research thing. So I began to participate in science and engineering fairs, and it was a really great decision. I think the biggest impact that doing these research projects has had on my learning and my career path is it gave me the problem solving skills that are really, really useful in real research. When you're doing a classroom assignment, everything is laid out for you so that you know how to solve each step as you go along. But in the real world, you're coming up with solutions to problems that haven't been answered yet. And you're asking questions that no one has asked before. So I think participating in science fairs where you're coming up with your own questions and working through the problems all by yourself is a really, really great experience for anyone who's interested in science and anyone who might think that research is possibly a career for them. One of my favorite experiences with science fair was going to the International Science and Engineering Fair, or ISEF. I got to attend a couple times. And that was a really cool experience because I got to meet people from all over the world who had similar interests to me, and we're also interested in cool aspects of science and trying to create things that would help people. And those, I form relationships with people from around the world that I keep in contact with a lot of them today. If I had one piece of advice for people who are interested in science, possibly as a career or just for some fun, explore all of your interests, not just those you think you might major in college or pursue a career in. An interdisciplinary framework is becoming so important, not only in research, but in industry and all over the place. So pursue not only your interest in science, but also your curiosity in other areas as well. And all of those things will support each other as you move forward.
Okay. So one of the exciting things that we have is that even though we were unable to have a state science and engineering fair this year, we put it out for all, we invited all the students, for anyone who would like to. It was not a requirement, but anyone who would like to go ahead and submit either a photograph or a video, and we asked if they could submit a video. Of course, we got all the permissions and everything to be able to put it online from parents. But a video, up to 2-minute video of their project that they wanted to share with other people. And so we are working and are in the final stages of creating web pages. And Teresa's saying yes. Web pages that you can go in and you can look at the students that chose to send things to us. And I need to say, this is something that completely optional, and the only ones that are on there are the ones that sent us something. So we didn't go, asking for people. But it's divided by elementary, middle school, and high school. The middle school and high school are also divided by discipline. So you can go in and see what types of projects made it to be considered to the state level fair and what the students have done. So anyway.
Yes, and we would love, love, love to continue to capture alumni stories. And I did just do an elementary. I was disappointed it's not ready quite yet to show you all, but it will be out very soon. But we want to, I think the more that kids can see other kids talking about this, and parents, the more you can help. They're a great talking point for any conversation you're having with parents about the importance of the experience. And so if you can think of alumni and you want to send them my way, I'd be happy to reach out. We're looking for kids that want to tell their story. We're not looking for kids that that made it to states, or they competed in a local fair and they want to share their story. We'd love to have it. So.
Yes. At this point, the more that we can put in there, I think the wider the range of experiences that students had, and the ones that when another student looks at it, may be the one that touches them, that kind of goes, maybe I can try this. Maybe I can do this. So I encourage, we're looking for things that we can get.
Yes, and we are just 3 minutes over our time, so I apologize for that, but we are so thankful that you were able to stay with us. And that's a great question, Sylvia. So if you need to jump off, that is like the last of the new content. We're so glad that you joined us, and we will stay on a couple minutes to try to answer questions.
Right.
And
we've got one right now. Sylvia asked about with how science teachers and coordinators be informed about fairs if they go virtual this year. I will tell you, all of the regional directors are looking at both options. We are looking at trying to find dates for a face-to-face option, if that can be a possibility. But we are also, in reality, looking at the fact that it may have to be a virtual fair. The experiences is different for the students, and we hate that, but we would much rather have a fair for the students to be able to participate in and get recognition than to not have that experience for them. So as we know things, we will be putting that out for the public. The scheduled date for the state fair is the last weekend in March. I think that's the 25th and 26th of March. If it goes virtual, it may be that we will divide it up into different days for each of the divisions, like elementary, middle school, and high school. But I think is that at this point in time, it's all conjecture as to what it will actually be. But we are planning on having competitions.
And we will, your regional directors will send out an email, but we will also send out, we'll put it on the website and we will put it out on social media too.
Right. If you go to our ncsef.org, there is a section under there for regional fairs, and it will be under, as we know things about the regional fairs, will be posted there.
Yes, so the new dates aren't up. I did put the link in there. Also, if you need to reach out to a regional fair director, how to email them is linked on that page.
Right. And I will be going through your research plans. So it will be a slower process now that I don't have the deadline, but I started trying to work on them, and I will pull my excuse too. I had both granddaughters with me, so I didn't get as much work done as I had hoped to have done. So, but I would like to give you some feedback on those because I feel that that's beneficial to you. No homework.
Yeah,
I got
it's
a
no
question on,
homework
is there any
unless
homework
you
today?
need to
No.
catch up. If you need to catch up, then that's your homework.
Right. I have homework to work on your research plans, but you don't have any.
All right. Well, with that, we want to thank you all for joining us. Don't hesitate to reach out to any of the three of us. We're happy to talk, set up a time. If anybody has particular questions about the virtual fair options, I'm happy to set up a follow-up connect with you. Just reach out to me and we'll just jump on the phone. All right.
And if it's like if your school system needs to be looking at virtual, or even if your school is looking at maybe needing to be virtual because you are not physically present in your school, then we're happy to share what we are looking at. So have a good rest of the week.
Yes, thank you all.
Try to
Good
stay
luck
cool.
opening this year. Have
Yes.
a great school year.
Try to stay cool and safe.
I see you're waving at me.
Bye.
Hi, thanks everybody.
Bye-bye.